Hey guys, I'm the Drink Pro, and today we're drinking Weller's C.Y.P.B. That's Create Your Perfect Bourbon. What's up everybody? Drink Pro here, Kyle. Thanks so much for joining me yet again. I hope you guys are having a good day. I hope you had a great holiday weekend last weekend watching me tear through some of that Booker's collection. I've got some really cool things coming up in the future, but today I'm starting a series of videos going through as much of the Weller line as I possibly can. Now I have released a video in the past of just the William LaRue Weller from 2019, but I'm hoping to look at a lot of the other whiskeys in the William LaRue Weller line and do them side by side. Part of this series has been sponsored by the Naptown Bourbon Club. Naptown Bourbon Club isn't paying me for these videos, they've simply provided the samples, and I really am doing it because I care about their organization. It's a 501c3. If you're in the Indianapolis area, check out the Naptown Bourbon Club. It's a great organization and they're doing a lot of good things, including help me make this video. The first in our series of Weller tastings is going to be the Create Your Perfect Bourbon. Now there's a bit of a story behind the C.Y.P.B line, which I'm not going to keep saying Create Your Perfect Bourbon, I'm just going to shorten it. The C.Y.P.B line actually started from a sort of experiment that was put on by Buffalo Trace. In November of 2015, Buffalo Trace put together their Create Your Perfect Bourbon website, and they launched to a big response. A lot of people ended up using this site. It essentially let you put yourself in the role of the master distiller. You got to pick an age statement, you got to pick a recipe, a mash bill, you got to decide where in the rick house the bottles would be stored, and you got to decide at what proof those bottles would be released. Now, like I said, this website was launched in November of 2015, but over just 2 years, they had over 100,000 responses. What Buffalo Trace found was a lot of people ended up having similar desires from their whiskey profiles. They ended up finding people wanted a wheated mash bill with about 8 years of age, but being aged at the top of the rick house, and then being bottled between 90 and 100 proof. So what did Buffalo Trace do? They decided to release a batch that was exactly like that and name it after this feature they had put together on a website. Thus was born Create Your Perfect Bourbon. And they decided to go with the Weller lineup simply because Weller was already a wheated mash bill line through Buffalo Trace, so they decided it might make sense to keep it within that lineup. Now, Weller C.Y.P.B is 95 proof, which is 47.5% alcohol, but there isn't an age statement on it. Now, the website says it's an 8-year whiskey. It seems like 8-year whiskey might be the majority of what went into these bottles, but there may have been some younger stuff that went into the blending process to get a flavor profile that they were looking for. That's something to be cautious about. You know, just because a website says, you liked it at 8 years, so we did what you liked, that may not be enough. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start pouring this, the Weller C.Y.P.B. Oh yeah. Boy, it smells good coming out of this bottle. I will tell you that the original release of the Weller C.Y.P.B was in the summer of 2018. Since the summer of 2018, they've done an annual release of the Weller C.Y.P.B, but the taste I'm coming with right now is the first release. This is the summer of 2018 bottling. I'm gonna tell you right now, as soon as I poured it, and even with the glass this far away from my nose, I can smell this grape note, this grape soda. Oh boy. That's really interesting. So from a distance, this subtle, like, grape soda kind of fills the room, but when I stick my nose into it a little bit more, I get a lot more of this berry note. Get a lot of blueberry, blackberry, raspberry, very, very berry. Maybe even strawberries. There's some cherry in there as well, some black cherry, the sweeter cherries. There's definitely some vanilla bean in this as well. It's not that sharp extract vanilla, it's a vanilla bean, a very rich, fresh, almost herbal vanilla. And as I keep nosing it, I continue to get that vanilla bean, but I'm also getting this very slight, sweet caramel note as well. Very common in a lot of whiskeys, but it's not nearly as sharp in this whiskey as it is in a lot of different ones. This is mainly vanilla dominant in terms of sweet aromatics. And then the berry kind of subsides. The initial smell right after opening the bottle and right after pouring it in is incredibly berry forward. It's just bursting with juicy, sweet fruit. But after some time, a lot of that's starting to dissipate, and it gives me this wonderful, like a vanilla, creamy, almost like a vanilla cappuccino kind of vibe. Starting to get some hints of cinnamon. I get a very, very subtle almond and a very, very subtle rose petal note from this. Almost like a rose water, I guess. But they're really quiet. The main dominant note after it settles is this vanilla herbal note. I think if you went away from it for a while and then came back to it, you would definitely get that fruity burst right away. I don't think it's gone, per se. I think it just becomes less dominant as you continue to smell the pour. I could seriously sit there and nose this all day. This smells so good. Maybe nutmeg, maybe cinnamon. And then there is this sort of quiet herbal note, a quiet coffee note maybe. I don't know. This is a wonderful nose. Oh, and I just got a touch of toasted oak there. Okay, I've given you every note in the world. I'm not going to keep smelling this. Let's taste it and see how it is. Oh, wow. I haven't tasted anything today. No alcohol yet. This is the first review of the day. It was incredibly smooth, easy to drink. I get a little bit of the complexity, a little bit of the nuance. I get this really interesting sweet nuttiness in the mid-palate. It's so inoffensive, almost entirely inoffensive. That really makes total sense because of what they were trying to do. When you're making a bourbon called Create Your Perfect Bourbon and you're building it based on what people want, you're going to get broad swaths of the population engaging in this survey, essentially, is what it was. And you're going to get a pretty toned down, evened out pour, something that's tasty, but very straightforward in terms of the flavors and the presentation. It's not going to be challenging. It's going to be comforting. It's really incredible. It's very, very, very quiet initially on the palate. There's almost nothing. It's actually kind of hard for me to give you notes on the first taste because the first taste is so quiet. I'm getting a little bit of honey, I suppose. There's a definite almond quality, hint of woodiness, that woody bark flavor, like a toasted oak on the mid-palate. Just a hint of white pepper on the finish. And this gentle, soft baking spice warmth that lingers. I get cinnamon and white pepper on the finish, and it lingers very gently with a hint of sweetness to just sit in the back of the palate. And it sticks around for a relatively long time for something that's 95 proof. Oh, and then going back to the nose after tasting it several times, I'm getting this real baking spice quality. That's kind of fun. Well, I gotta say, the nose on this whiskey is unbelievable, but the taste kind of leaves something to be desired for me. I tend to find things that are higher proof, more complex, more explosive to be really interesting and in my wheelhouse. So, it's not my favorite whiskey. Certainly for the retail price of this, which I believe is $50 to $60, something like that, I would certainly absolutely pick it up for that. But I know this whiskey goes in the secondary market for astronomical figures, several $100s a bottle. This definitely isn't worth $400 or whatever the price will be tomorrow. The secondary market on this is really about having a rare bottle to complete your collection. There's a completionist mentality with a lot of different bourbons, specifically in the Weller lineup and a lot of other Buffalo Trace products. Getting all of the BTAC bottles is sort of a big deal. Getting all of the, well, E.H. Taylor right behind me is sort of a big deal. So people try to be completionist, and Buffalo Trace knows how to take advantage of that fact. I think they recognize the value in having people look for their bottles, having being sought after, and they don't necessarily need to monetize it on the front end to get everyone to know the Weller lineup. Everybody knows the Weller brand, everybody knows Buffalo Trace, and that's very intentional, and that's a sort of added value in terms of a marketing perspective they're getting from the rarity and the high secondary prices on their bottles. Like I said, I would never pay secondary for this. If you have a lot of extra money, you want to be a completionist and catch them all and have all the pretty Weller colors on your shelf, I think that's fine. I mean, enjoy it, make the most of it, but please, please, please open those bottles and drink them with your friends. There's no sense in being a completionist if you're not going to share the love and enjoy what you're purchasing. I've always felt it odd when people want to collect things just to collect them. If you collect them and then you drink them in a couple years, then I really understand that mentality. All of the things I collect records, obviously I collect bottles of bourbon. All the things I collect are to be used, to be engaged with in a meaningful way. I don't really collect art, but even if you did, you're collecting art to look at it aesthetically, and that's never really felt like what you're doing with a bottle of whiskey. It's not an aesthetic item. Maybe the bottle is, but you can pop the bottle and have a couple pours, and it's still an aesthetic item. I'll get off my soapbox about drinking your bourbons. Big shout out again to the Naptown Bourbon Club for sharing this bourbon that I'm happy to see that they opened. There are a lot of people that are going to watch this that are going to probably take some offense to that. That's fine. What am I going to do? If I know you and you are a collector, you probably open your bottles, because I don't stick around many people who are collectors and don't open their bottles. So take that for what it's worth. Hope you enjoyed this review. The next Weller review is going to be the Weller 12 year. That's coming up next week. And then I should do one of these each week, culminating with a review of all these bourbons. The 12, the Antique, the Special Reserve, the C.Y.P.B, and the Full Proof. So that'll be a fun lineup. I'm going to keep doing these side by side throughout the days. So the next review I'm going to do, the Weller 12, I will also do a side by side with that and the Weller C.Y.P.B. I hope you'll be tuning in next time. Thanks again, Naptown Bourbon Club. Keep drinking like professionals, everybody. Cheers.